Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first full-length episode of the Midwest Spook-Kast. With me here in our little makeshift studio, we've got myself, Mariah Tietjen. We've got Alex Stengel.
Hello.
We've got Kayla Wellnitz.
Yo, what's up?
And you might notice if you listen to our introductory episode, we're actually missing our fourth member, Mr. Johnny McDonagh. Johnny decided to go on vacation, which he very much deserves for working so hard, and while he was on vacation, he decided to pick up a few DoorDash orders. He got this weird DoorDash order, but he decided to take it anyways, he said, because it was a good tip. Let's be known, he got lost delivering to the Paris Catacombs. So Johnny is lost. He is not with us today. But he is perfectly in the place that we are going to be discussing today. So I'll hand it over to Alex to give us a brief history about the Paris Catacombs.
Yeah, hopefully he can get out of there in time so he can edit this video. I guess if you're listening to it, he probably got out. So our story for the Paris Catacombs actually goes all the way back to the 2nd century with the Romans, because they initially did not bury their dead. They would burn and do cremation instead. And it wasn't until more Christians and Jews started arriving in Rome that preferred burying the dead because they believed in the resurrection of the body, and they believed that cremation was desecrating that.
Kind of on that. So with the desecration of the body, so if you're cremated, does that mean you float as a big ball of gas? If like during the apocalypse, it's just like blah, 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 it's floating away. You don't come back into your body.
You turn into a dust devil kind of thing?
A dust devil?
You're a tumbleweed.
A tumbleweed.
That's what you come back as, is a tumbleweed.
Well, you'd come back in the urn that they put you in, so you come back in just this dark jar, probably.
Oh, God,
you
a floating jar.
I'm a genie in a bottle,
there
baby.
There you go. Yeah, you're a genie. You're a dusty genie.
Coming in and let me out.
And so around this time, Paris is actually being built by the Romans and the locals that they conquered. And what they did in part of building Paris originally was there was this limestone quarry that they created south of Paris. So they would excavate these large chunks of limestone and transport them to where Paris would eventually be built. So now we have a whiteboard here with a magnetic pin. We're putting a pin in that because we will return to that quarry later on. So don't forget that. Mariah, you look like you already forgot.
You just picked the magnet that blends in with the board. Like, there's literally a red, green, blue, purple, yellow, or another green one.
Are you
and
happy?
he picked the white one.
There.
Much appreciated.
This is staying in.
I see it better.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Do you remember what you had to remember now?
There was a quarry there. A limestone
There's
quarry.
a quarry right where this dot is. Okay,
limestone
good.
quarry.
Good. Around this time, Christianity is becoming a little more popular in Rome, meaning more people are converting to it and wanting to bury their dead instead of cremating them. And there isn't a lot of space because typically the cemeteries are all in the vicinity of a church or a cathedral, and they don't have a lot of room there. They're usually in the middle of the city. And so what Jews and Christians would do is they would band together and put a lot of money into buying a plot in the cemetery and dig one large vault and have multiple family members buried down there. Eventually, what ended up happening was they would buy a lot, dig down, and they would actually accidentally bust through a wall into someone else's vault.
Oops.
Because they thought, oh, I bought this, no one else is doing this, expand outwards. And so the Romans eventually started, this is where the catacombs began, was they intentionally would have land reserved to bury it'd be a mass grave for just about everyone to be buried in. And it wasn't until 1313 AD when Emperor Constantine officially made Christianity legal, and within 10 years it became the dominant religion in Rome. It pretty much became the official religion of Rome, which means the entirety of the Roman Empire now wants to bury their dead, so they really needed to have those catacombs made. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit to the 1700s in Paris.
That was a big time gap.
There's a little bit of a time gap.
Technology was so slow back
300
then.
AD to, the 1700s. And we're going to specifically into 1774, where the Hospital of Les Innocents, I'm sorry, I speak English and a little bit of German, not French. There was a tunnel underneath the hospital there, and it collapsed into the tunnel. And also, there was a lot of heavy rainfalls that year, and so there was a cemetery there, and the bodies were actually coming out of the ground a little bit. Very Scooby-Doo, Zombie Island kind of horror,
Yeah, I'm just seeing like a movie, like you see them in the horror movies all the time where a hand
the
just
hand
randomly
just
pops out.
Yep.
Like, ah!
Pretty much the entire cemetery was like that. And they realized that the church hospital kind of building it was fell into, remove the pin from the board, into that limestone quarry that they had dug. The reason it happened was because when they were making that quarry, it wasn't mapped. And what maps did exist are very damaged from what I've found. So they kind of forgot that it was there.
Whoops.
Because, it was over 1,000 years.
Well, yeah, anyone who made the quarries is probably dead by the time they had this happen.
Very well ripened in the ground.
Yeah, they're not going to know.
You'd think. So, yeah, no one alive, knew that they were there. They all forgot that they even existed. And so, with that heavy rainfall, King Louis XVI made an order to relocate the dead in Paris because there was a really bad odor and just they were running out of room to put all the bodies. And so they would take in covered wagons during the night, they would dig up bodies, put them in the wagon and cover it and take them south of Paris to the entrance to that limestone quarry and just kind of put the bodies in there.
How rude.
Yeah.
They were resting peacefully, and these people just go, nope.
Well, no,
You're done resting in the wagon.
They were coming out of the ground. They weren't resting.
They were still resting, just maybe not so peacefully. They still were resting, though.
At least they're doing it at night. That way, during the day, all the people that are not into horror like me at least can go about their day. They're not buying fruit and look over like, oh my gosh, a covered wagon. Is it Laura Ingalls Wilder or is it my dead aunt? It's probably your dead aunt.
A skull pops off of the back of the wagon. It's like, oh no, stop the horses. We gotta get this skull.
Yeah, I can just imagine, having to wake up really late, like 2 a.m. so to go to the bathroom, and you see this wagon go by and an arm is hanging out. Like, oh, okay. They try to do it to be discreet, but they would pile these carts full of bodies so you could smell them. And because they only did it at night, it ended up taking them about 12 years to relocate every known buried body into those quarries. And also what took a lot of time was they realized quickly that the limestone quarry wasn't big enough to hold everyone. So they actually had to expand on it more. And this is where the belief of the Paris catacombs being somewhere around 200 miles, it's all interconnected. It's not one long tunnel, but they don't know exactly how long it is and where all the tunnels are, because even then they weren't mapping them out that much. There was also a lot of cave-ins while they were digging around for places for the bodies to be put. But they would just pile the bodies in there very unceremoniously. And then we come to 1810, after the French Revolution has happened, and there was a French architect that wanted to have a way to remember those who died and to also honor the dead that was already in the Paris catacombs. And this is why we have pictures of very decorative pieces made with the remains of the roughly 6 million people that are in the catacombs.
Picasso could never.
No. No, Picasso's got nothing on this. And so what they would do is they would find the bones that are more intact, set them to the side, and there would be a offshoot from a tunnel, and they would take bodies and they would just pile them and back And then the decorative piece you see is actually a decorative wall. It's a barrier wall that keeps all of the remains in place so they don't spill out onto the main hallways. And also they build it up to the ceiling to be extra support. And a lot of those structures that they built actually, you notice they go all the way to the ceiling because they're an extra bit of support for the tunnels.
But they only wanted the nice bones, right? Though
it's
what
what
decoration.
From what it looks like, you see like a cross made with like 12 skulls or whatever, and they all seem to be in pretty good shape compared to having a split head or.
Yeah, so that skull that I mentioned that fell off the back of the wagon, no go.
Probably
cracked
it
to pieces.
It probably cracked and it got thrown somewhere in the back with all the other ones.
How rude!
Yeah.
What if that was someone important like Napoleon Bonaparte?
You think that's where Napoleon Bonaparte was buried?
Why not? What makes him better than the rest?
I just don't
I
know.
don't know, Napoleon Bonaparte, I don't know.
You know what? Screw him. He can be thrown in there too.
The last little bit I have here to share before I hand it over to Kayla is it was found that during World War II, both the Nazis and the French resistance had used the Paris catacombs at various points. It's believed that they were never in the catacombs at the same time. Mm-hmm. The fantasy of it is the romanticized part of it was they were in the tunnels at the same time and they were like 50 feet apart and they never knew it because there was never any conflict down there. But they did find there are some pieces of German equipment with German writing on it to prove that the Nazis had used the catacombs at one point as a base of operation, and also at one point the French resistance did as well. And it was believed that the catacombs would suffice as a bomb shelter. However, Paris was never bombed with artillery or aircraft at all during the war, so it's never been tested, but it's been theorized that that would be a safe place for people to go and hide during a bombardment of a city.
Interesting part with all that is that with Paris being kind of that middle ground of course, in World War II, you got the French resistance going on that does not want to be German occupied, and then you got the side that is, they either approve of being occupied by Germany or they just feel like, they're being forced into it. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that there is this closeness going on there because, again, Paris is French, but you still got the German occupation going on, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is all I have for my portion, so I will now hand it over to Kayla, who will talk about the more interesting sides of it now that the lecturer is done. I can go on for a while longer, but no one wants to hear that. So, Kayla, wake everyone back up with something more exciting.
All right, thanks, Alex, for that fantastic introduction. The whole time, all I could hear in my head was like the song "Spooky, Spooky Skeletons" going on in my head. It's after July 4th now here in the United States, so it is officially spooky season. Alrighty, so when it comes to this eerie historical location, it's strange that there is not more reported ghost stories. One might hypothesize that because it is technically illegal to explore most of the catacombs, most cataphiles may be unwilling to share their stories or prefer to keep the stories to themselves. So when I say cataphiles, this essentially is referring to the explorers of the catacombs. As, I guess if you are an expert of the catacombs, you need a fancy name for your fancy self.
Well, why not? You're going somewhere illegal for your job. You need a fancy name.
Does that mean like people who go into abandoned buildings get a fancy name?
Yeah.
Urban explorers?
Yeah.
I believe it's called trespassers.
See?
Dang.
See, they got a fancy name.
They even get a misdemeanor named after them.
Alright, so the few stories out there host quite disturbing scenarios that make one question the potential validity of the story, but it also makes one think, what could be with a place that is a bony refuge for over 6 million Parisians?
Kayla, you want to tell the people where you found these stories? Because I think that's the best part is your sources.
I have to commend myself on my research. I found a lot of these stories on Reddit, so I wanted personal stories to go off of because I love to read other people's stories. I am an admin of SD Ghost Hunting and Stories, so obviously I love hearing other people's stories, but Reddit is not credible, I guess, to most people, and including myself. But I still thought it'd be an interesting source to go to. But regardless, there wasn't much. In the few stories I found, people were like, yeah, I had something really interesting happen there. But I won't talk about it because it was bad.
Well, it was properly traumatizing.
You know, I've had some traumatizing things happen. I will tell you gladly what happened.
But not everyone You are in the mental health area. Why are you not understanding that not everyone processes their trauma
I
like
can
that?
respect that. I can respect that. Thank you for...
Don't invalidate their experiences.
It is also possible they didn't want to talk about because they may have done illegal things down there and they would be fessing up to it.
That's totally true.
So they say, oh, it was so traumatizing, I don't want to talk about it.
That's
Totally
okay.
true.
That's okay. I mean, you don't have to tell the Popo. You can tell me.
Send her a direct message. If you've ever been to the Paris Catacombs, find her on Reddit. What's your Reddit handle so they can message you?
It's South Dakota Mom something. I can't remember the full handle for it. Alrighty, so in the early 1990s, Cataphiles located a camera with footage of a man going through the catacombs. Now, take in mind, the 90s wasn't that long ago. That's when I was born. Even though it seems like so long ago, the recording software was so much different back then.
That was when let me add a statement. That was when all four of us were, not just
valid.
you. All four of us were born in the 90s.
30th coming our way.
Don't remind us of that.
But near the end of this video that we found, so during this video, you can hear this guy at the beginning. He's recording the different walls. There's graffiti all over the walls. Alex earlier talked about how there were the German Nazis and, of course, the Parisians that occupied this area. So you can see some of that graffiti still to this day. And for him, seeing these different graffiti signified that people had explored this area. And the further he got, the less and less graffiti he was running into. So that signifies to either the cataphiles or the audience watching on YouTube that he was essentially getting into somewhere that it would be very difficult to escape out of. And at the end, while this individual is finishing his exploration, or what we can see of his exploration, gradually you hear him rapidly breathing. He sounds very anxious. He's quite worked up, reasonably so. I think if you're alone in somewhere like this, by yourself, surrounded by millions of dead people, reasonably you're going to be scared. He ends up dropping the camera and running away. And so the question to this day is this man still alive? Is he not? What happened to him? And it's so hard to say, too, because now we're looking at the 90s. That was, looking at each year, it can be over 30 years ago. Now, the one question that arises in the community of YouTube on this is, was this man being tormented by something paranormal, or was he simply scared of being in the tunnels as long as he was? And then there is a movie that's referenced that many believe is similar to this work. It's called As Above, So Below. So it's loosely based on the camera footage in the 9 Circles of Hell, or Dante's Inferno. So there's a lot of different things that happen in this movie. I haven't seen it myself just because it sounds kind of out there. I'm a horror lover through and through, but I just kind of not my cup of tea.
If you enjoy like Blair Witch Project or like the Paranormal Activities movies, it's a very similar quality. I'd say more Blair Witch, like the first one. Yeah, I've seen parts of it. It's like Blair Witch. So there's parts that are really good. And there's parts that are. You did this in one take, didn't you?
Yeah. Blair Witch can be a really good... and it's interesting what happened with that movie in the 90s. And that's a whole other topic in itself. But yeah, if you're interested in checking out something similar, it's got some great reviews out there. It's got some not so great reviews. So it depends on what your movie taste is.
Let's have a movie night.
Yes.
With some popcorn, and let's watch that movie.
And hopefully we can find Johnny.
Yeah, maybe Johnny will show up in the movie.
So, one legend states that if you're in the catacombs past midnight, to beware. According to the legend, the walls begin to whisper, coaxing you into the tunnels further and further until you are unable to return. I find it interesting that it's midnight versus, like, the witching hour. So, I'm kind of curious, I couldn't find the connection between midnight and why it is specifically then. Like, if I go at 9 in the morning, am I not going to be coaxed further into the tunnels?
You're going to hear the Wicked Witch of the West. Come, my pretties, come, my pretties.
Oh, God. I will run for dear life. And if you see me run, know that you should run, because I don't run very often. So, on to my next story I have for you. So, there's the ghost like Alex, I also don't speak French, so please bear with me. If I butcher it, feel free to make fun of me. I can take some criticism. So there's the ghost of Philibert Aspiert. While the French Revolution was going on, Mr. Philibert was a doorman for the Val de Grace Hospital while on a mission to get a bottle of wine from a cellar in 1793. And so this is kind of important to note that many cellars at that time, and still currently, are held within the confines of the catacombs, and still many wine dispensaries, whatever it is, refineries, have their storage there because it's deep within the ground. It's a great way to keep stuff cooler in a less expensive way.
So these hospitals back then had these cellars for the workers to go get some wine
No. Like, it was close by for him. He knew where to go access the wine.
But, like, could the workers drink wine? Because I think the workers even now should be able to drink wine while on the job. So if they were allowed to, then why'd we ever get rid of that rule?
Yeah, if we really want the nurses on our side, we should just say, yeah, every nurse can have a glass of wine with their shift. And I think...
I think they might require stronger sometimes.
Possibly.
But keep them, like, sober still,
That's
so we
true.
can't give them too strong. But, like, if you just dealt with an awful patient, go to the cellar, get a glass real quick, and call it good.
So kind of moving further into that with Mr. Philibert getting lost. So he actually had a singular candle with him because back in that day, they didn't have fancy cellular devices. They didn't have a flip phone. All you had was a great candle.
No flashlights either?
No.
Man, one candle.
One candle is all you need for a good time. So lost and confused, Philibert was unable to escape and perished. He was later identified 11 years later by cataphiles whom were able to identify him by the keychain around his waist. So the kind of sad part about Mr. Philibert was that they actually found that if he would have kept going, he almost was able to escape.
So close, yet
Yep.
so far away.
Rip.
Very unfortunate.
So after being identified 11 years later, upon the place his body was found, his body was buried. So they didn't put him with the rest of the body, so he didn't even get to party with everybody else. He just got to be by himself.
All by myself.
Is he buried in the area that you can actually tour the catacombs, or is he buried in the majority where you can't actually, it's illegal to go?
Actually, he's in the part that's illegal to go into. It is, but still a lot of cataphiles pay tribute to him and will go visit. Kind of an interesting little tidbit. So to this day, a sign dictates where Philibert's tomb lies. It is said on November 3rd, you may find yourself hunting the catacombs with the dearly departed Philibert. Those reported to have heard him state that he yells for help.
Friends, my birthday is around November 3rd. Let's take a vacation to find, well, Johnny, he is in the Paris catacombs, but let's go on the 3rd and listen to Philibert.
Is that what you want for your birthday, is to go visit Philibert?
I want to hear him. I want to hear him go, help!
Help!
Go,
I heard it's your birthday!
ghost hunting the catacombs
For my
for
birthday!
your birthday?
Are we gonna
Yes.
find Johnny then?
Yeah, that's what I said. Like, we'll help him out
or,
too.
Or what's left of him by then.
Yeah. He might have joined Philibert, but that's
he might just became a cataphile.
maybe.
Not only do the citizens of Paris and those knowledgeable enough to be considered cataphiles get to witness interesting events in the catacombs, but so do the police force of this city. In 2004, multiple police officers were patrolling parts of the catacombs that are inaccessible to the public. While exploring the catacombs, the police reported hearing what sounded to be dogs barking in alert. The closer they got, the more they found, with locating a 3,000 square feet of gallery, a living area, bar, entertainment area with carved seats. The police found that not only was this site of a gathering, but also multiple cameras were set up with pirated electricity that played recordings of barking dogs in order to alarm any who might try to trespass. When the police went back to investigate a couple days later, all was gone but the car seats and a note that stated, and of course, I'm not going to try pronouncing it, don't want to butcher it, it just states don't search. But now when entering the public area of the catacombs that is, again, accessible, one will regard the sign at the entrance which states, well, I'm not going to say it, it's in French, it roughly translates to stop, this is the Empire of the Dead. Now, many individuals who explore even the legal parts of the catacombs report feelings of unease and discomfort, with so many having gotten lost. Take in mind that the best map of the catacombs was made in the 18th century. There are most likely numerous dead bodies throughout the tunnels, anywhere from the original tunnel for the quarries to modern day. Feeling a bit of unease and discomfort might be the norm in this type of area. So you might see a person in Roman garb, or you might see someone modern looking. What a twist.
And everything in between.
Yes.
Exactly. What a twist. I mean, everyone talks about the historical ghosts, but not the modern day ghosts.
Well, according to what Alex said earlier, it sounds like you might be able to see like a Russian person, like in Russian garb, because they were there. So maybe you find someone in Nazi uniform.
It's possible, yeah.
And the French
Why
were
not?
there, so maybe a French soldier man.
French have been there for a while.
Well, but you said like the French soldiers were down there, so maybe a French
Yeah,
soldier man
the
was in
resistance,
there.
yeah.
You know,
It's possible.
you'll find it's a
Why
variety.
Outside of the legal areas, people have reported seeing shadowy figures, the sensation of being grabbed, orbs of light, and various other supernatural events. With the tunnels disclosing any other sound, one might simply go crazy hearing their own thoughts. Now, kind of moving, Mariah might respect this one. This was totally up her aisle. A phantom drummer.
Yeah.
Now, this soldier got lost in the tunnels, but unfortunately never found his way out. He probably was with Philibert, and to this day, he is drumming his way out.
He's got that old like snare drum. He's like dun 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 dun. Yeah.
First you hear Philibert yell help, and then you hear this, and you're like, what is going on?
This just makes me want to take that trip even more. Like we'll hear the drummer boy, and then we'll hear Philibert, and it'll be the best birthday ever, celebrated in the Paris Catacombs.
Jeez.
See, this just makes me think of Lord of the Rings, drums in the deep.
Yes. All right, and I know you both love a Lady in White story because every place has a Lady in White.
Everyone does.
Cool.
It's not a real haunted place if you don't have a lady in white.
Now, this young woman was reported to have gotten lost in the catacombs, and after passing away, people report seeing her spirit either wearing a long white gown or just appearing white. This beautiful, and note that she is beautiful, you'll see her and be amazed by her beauty, is often trying to help get people out of this location.
Oh, so she's helpful.
And yeah,
She's not like most of those ladies in whites that start like chasing you away. She's like, let me help you.
Dang. So, 3 more stories here really fast. So the YouTube channel Just Creepy has an interesting subscriber story. In it, the subscriber is alone in the catacombs for hours and hears voices behind him while deep into the catacombs. At one point, the explorer is so exhausted and unable to escape that they accept their untimely death. The explorer hears deep grumbling and opens his eyes to see a skeletal being staring at him. He ends up fleeing the catacombs and makes it back to his hotel safely, but still has frequent nightmares about it. And he actually asks them at the end, he's like, has anyone else experienced this? I don't want to feel like I'm alone. And of course, everyone inserts, yeah, I had something scary happen, but I'm not going to share it.
Why do people think it's a smart idea to go explore alone? Like, so many of your stories have been like, oh, this person went in alone. And I'm like, you could have saved all of this if you didn't go alone.
Even in groups, though, things get really spooky. I've been plenty of places in a group, and you get...
But I feel like in a group, you're less likely to, like, get lost and perish. Like, I would feel safe going in there with Alex as an Eagle Scout. He'd be like, oh, I remember this symbol, that we're on our way out, Like, but you gotta have that one person in your group that knows how to get you out of things.
But what if Alex is the first one to take off running for the hills?
Alex, we're just trying to save Johnny.
Can I get a word in here?
Yes, we're waiting for you.
Well, you kept talking. I didn't want to talk over either of you. That would be rude.
Do it.
No, I'm pretty sure I'd get lost in the catacombs. I feel like I think it would be a matter of how... I think it's a matter of how far you can go in before you start feeling lost. I have a pretty decent sense of direction, but I feel like if we walked around there for, I don't know, maybe like more than half an hour, I'd probably start remembering things wrong or not remembering things. There's a lot of videos I saw where people are walking down there and a cataphile is taking them on a tour and points at these arrows and they're pointing just all these different directions, and he said, if you ever get lost, the worst thing to do is to follow the arrows because they lead to nowhere.
Oh.
He said the cataphiles will put those up there to confuse people, and you'll be following the arrows like the whole day until you can't walk anymore, probably. Like they don't actually lead anywhere.
So the cataphiles want to find more bodies, huh?
It seems like it. I don't know.
So, second to last story I got for y'all. So, if y'all know who Zach Baggins is from Ghost Hunters, he has his own spin-off series called Netherworld. And in it, he goes to explore the Paris catacombs. So he stops to visit one Parisian first that shares his story about finding himself lost from his own group. He ends up tripping, and when he looks up, a man is pointing at the number 1777 and the letters G on the wall. With the research, it was found that Charles Guillemot was one of the architects who helped reconstruct the tunnels in 1770s. He was known to leave the letter G wherever he worked. So, maybe you might get a little friendly with an architect.
He just wanted to be acknowledged. He was like, friend, I'm the person who did this. Look at, this is the number and my initial. Give me credit. He's just proud of what he did.
He should be proud.
So was he buried near that then?
No. He actually was not. So that's the interesting part, is why is he haunting this location if he is not present there?
Was he buried in the catacombs? Do we know that?
No.
We don't know that for sure if he was or wasn't?
From what I found, he wasn't. He just was the architect for it.
I'm saying he's just proud of what he built, so he's hanging out
so
there.
Proud his spirit went all the way there just to sit at that spot.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
If it's your life's work, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do with my life's work. I'm going to show off Dexter and come back in the next room and be like, yo, look at this, I made it.
You want to explain who Dexter is for our
That
listeners?
is my child, my 7-year-old. So later in the exploration of the catacombs, Zach and his group are deep into the tunnels when an audible woman's laughter is heard. So note that none of the investigators heard it until after the recording was done. And so there was a woman present with them, but you can tell because Zach ends up sharing the clip of when they heard the voice, and you can see the woman, and you can see her lips are closed. There's no way she could have laughed that audibly. Later on, Zach talks about how he has 3 cameras set up, and he's got a rig so that no one can take him down but himself. And 2 of these cameras ended up going missing. And the last camera that they were able to find, there were no people walking by, but instead a white figure in a white cloak appearing to be from the 18th century roamed the halls. So let's kind of go back to Alex's story about how people were transported by wagons. And of course, too, with this being more of a Christian movement, was this, possibly a Christian monk? Was this someone in more of, religious attire that was just, maybe in the afterlife still doing their godly duty? And my last story for y'all, this one, just everyone loves a good spook. So in the 1450s, 40 Parisians were killed by werewolves.
Yes, we getting Twilight in here.
No.
Team Jacob, Team Jacob.
Nobody.
We got Paris Catacomb and Werewolf crossover episode here.
Exactly. And one woman reported in the 1940s that a werewolf drug her from the city and into the catacombs, and she was surrounded by other women who were kidnapped by werewolves.
Okay, obviously she was let go because she was able to tell the story.
Yeah.
So nothing happened. She just showed up. She just was dragged there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
When did this happen?
In the 1940s.
We don't know a specific date or a year.
No, just that it happened in the 1940s.
Well, half of that was World War II. And the other half was after World War II, so...
How do we know this wasn't just extremely hairy men trying to do something stupid?
It is very possible.
Like, they might not actually have been werewolves. They're like, they might have just had a whole lot of, facial hair.
They just haven't shaved in a while,
But, they could have just been wearing, furs, fur coat or something, a hunting coat or something, and then, just have a long beard and stuff. So it might not have actually been werewolf. I'm skeptic about the werewolves.
Man.
I'm not the skeptic, but I'm skeptic about the werewolves.
I mean, reasonably so. I mean, the 1450s thing throws me off a little bit, but now there's this huge gap where nobody sees werewolves, and boom, there's a werewolf.
Yeah, that's a little interesting.
Well, to kind of finish this story off a little bit, I'm going to pass it on to Alex for some feel-good stories, because we love a feel-good bony moment.
Give us a wholesome moment.
Right, so I've been teasing everyone here that I found a piece of really wholesome history that deals with the Paris Catacombs. So if I asked you what the first thing that comes to your mind is, if I tell you a story that involves Jews and Muslims, what's the first thing that comes into your mind?
Nothing good.
Nothing good?
Religious war.
Religious war, yep. Well, here's a story. Muslims protecting Jews from the Nazis during the Holocaust.
Oh, they're protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
Respect.
And so this is actually a short book called The Grand Mosque of Paris, a story of how Muslims rescued Jews during the Holocaust. You can actually find it on Amazon. I actually ordered it. I have a physical copy of it. It's only about 40 pages long, and it was written by... She was a children's author. She wrote children's stories, so she made it in the same style, really wide book with a lot of illustrations on only a few paragraphs on a page. And each page talks about different facets of this story. And the overarching part of it was when the Nazis marched into Paris, the Jews ran to go to find places to hide. And one of the places they went to is they knocked on the doors of the Grand Mosque in Paris. And the Muslims, they could have easily turned them away because they didn't want Jews in the mosque maybe, or they also could say, you are a hazard to us if we protect you, because everyone who harbored and hid Jews were also being persecuted as well. So it was putting themselves in a lot of danger in doing so. But one of the places that they hid the Jews, among other places in their kind of closed off community, was actually in the Paris catacombs. They had an entrance that to get into the catacombs there. And one of the ways they would get people out was they would take them in a tunnel through the catacombs to a small port where barges would come in and drop off barrels of wine. And the reason that mattered was there was no export. There was nothing that they were putting these barrels to leave to go back with. And so they were able to hide people in those barrels on the barge for them to escape. Another thing they did was they actually forged fake documents saying that certain Jews actually converted to Islam and they were no longer Jewish, so that the Nazis wouldn't be hunting them anymore. The most extreme case of that I found was they actually, in the middle of the night, a Muslim went into their private cemetery, found a blank tombstone, and carved a Jewish man's family name into the tombstone to solidify their story that this man was actually Muslim and that his great-great-grandfather, however far back, converted to Islam and therefore he was as well, just to show their dedication for it.
Dang, that person got a free name change.
Yeah, and so a big part of why they treated them so well is most of the Jews and Muslims in Paris are actually from North Africa, so like Morocco, that region, and in that area, Jews and Muslims actually refer to each other as brothers. Even though they are two very different religions, they consider themselves to be related in some way, and they are respectful of that. And a lot of those Jews and Muslims are the ones that lived in Paris, because the northern part of Africa was under French control for a while there, and so they had a lot of connection there. And also, since they lived in the same area, they looked very similar. So the ones that would have their name changed, usually it's because they could pass off as being Muslim. They would remove their yarmulke and put a fez on, and most Nazis wouldn't know the difference. And so that was a little short story. I highly recommend it. It's only about $20 on Amazon to get a physical copy of it. In the afterword of it, in the section they talk about their research, they mention how the reason that not a lot of people know about it was because they were never found out during the war. Because if they were found out by the Nazis, they would have probably all been executed and the mosque would have been desecrated and destroyed possibly. And even after the war, no one really talked about it that much, but it's been estimated that they rescued approximately 1,700 people of both Jews and Allied pilots and paratroopers that were trapped behind enemy lines. They helped get some of them out as well.
Wow.
What a good story about how people can set aside their differences and actually help one another.
Mm-hmm.
That's like one of those wholesome, like, feel-good moments.
It's a restore faith in humanity a little bit there.
We need
Absolutely.
that. We need that.
We need more people like them in the world.
We should have like a little holiday to celebrate them because they are great. Or even a movie. That would be even really neat to see a movie about that.
That would be a very interesting film. I don't know if there is because it seemed like there was so little known about it. But
Right.
yeah, they also mentioned that most of the people they interviewed were very old. And this was, I don't remember when the book was written, but it was written not that long ago, really. So a lot of the people that were alive then are either dead or very old and about to die probably. But they said that a lot of the stories that they were able to get interviews for, they were children during this, and some people were only there for a matter of hours while they were getting them transported out of the city. And so a small child might not remember what happened or realize what was happening, and they were never told because they wanted to make sure kid doesn't accidentally say something out loud and get them found out. So they said it was very well kept secret. One more funny thing to go with this one was the gentleman that was in charge of the mosque. He had to play both sides. He had to help hide the Jews, but he also had to be cooperative with the Nazis. And the Nazis were actually scared of a Muslim uprising in Africa if they, treated the Muslims poorly in France. So they were trying to be very respectful, but still be the figure of authority. One of the things that he would do, they had secret alarms going off. He would stall the Nazis as long as he could outside the mosque and say something along the lines of, if you are Muslim, you can wear your shoes in the mosque. If you are not, you need to remove your shoes. Well, they were all wearing big military boots, so they were having to take all this time to unlace their boots and take them off. And a place that the Nazis were too afraid to search was the women's section of the prayer areas. They refused to search in there because they didn't want to be disrespectful. The Muslims realized this and immediately realized they had the perfect place to hide people. They would hide them in the women's prayer section because the Nazis refused to search there because they didn't want to be trespassing and disrespectful. And so...
That didn't stop them before. How disrespectful were they to the Jews ripping them out of their homes?
Well, they didn't care about disrespecting them. They cared about disrespecting the Muslims.
I guess.
They wanted to keep that on good relations.
I guess.
Dang, much respect to the Muslims that did that, especially their leader. So thanks for sharing that interesting story, Alex. That, we always like a really good feel-good story, especially with a topic like this, because death isn't an easy topic for everyone to talk about. We always have so many questions about what's next, what's to come, and being able to connect something that's positive with something that, is both frightening for many and sad for many as well. That it kind of helps us remember, there's so many good things, too, in this life that we should be grateful for. But let's pass it on to you, Mariah, with our closing note.
Yes, so we're going to connect the Paris Catacombs to the Midwest here in our next episode. We're going to specifically dive into some catacombs that you'll find in the United States. I personally am very interested in learning more about the Indianapolis catacombs in Indiana, so I'll do a lot of research on that. So we'll do that. There's a couple other catacombs in the Midwest. Yeah. So in the meantime, you can find us on all of our different social medias. We have a Facebook page called the Midwest Spook-Kast. Just Midwest Spook-Kast. We are on TikTok under the same name at Midwest Spook-Kast. Twitter is weird and said Midwest Spook-Kast is too long of a handle. So we are just Spook-Kast on Twitter because that's all they allowed. So that's a different handle. I just checked our Gmail and we don't have any anonymous stories to share for this episode. But if you would like to share a story for us to read at the end of one of our episodes, feel free to email us at midwestspookcast@gmail.com. And your anonymous story might just be featured at the end of one of our episodes. It could be a wholesome story like Alex just finished out with. This could be something spooky and scary. It could be somewhere right in the middle. If you're willing to share it, we're willing to read it on our podcast and react to it. So I believe that's it for us today, and we look forward to hearing in our Midwest Spook-Kast Gmail, and we'll have the next episode out in the coming weeks. See you later, ghoul friends.